The coffee was still steaming in Dr. Zephyr Castellanos' mug when the first reports came through the emergency broadcast system. She had been reviewing atmospheric data from a Mauna Kea observatory, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed nothing more unusual than a minor solar flare activity. The morning sun filtered through her laboratory windows in Geneva, casting long shadows across banks of quantum computers that hummed with the collective knowledge of humanity's greatest scientific minds. "Zephyr, you need to see this." Her research partner, Dr. Cale Thornwick, burst through the laboratory doors with an expression she had never seen before: pure, unadulterated terror. His usually pristine lab coat was wrinkled, his silver hair disheveled as if he had been running his hands through it repeatedly. Behind his wire-rimmed glasses, his eyes held the kind of fear that comes from witnessing something that fundamentally changes one's understanding of reality. The wall-mounted displays flickered to life, showing feeds from observatories around the globe. What Zephyr saw made her coffee mug slip from nerveless fingers, shattering against the polished floor. Descending through Earth's atmosphere were objects that defied every law of physics she understood. They moved with impossible grace, their sleek forms cutting through the sky like liquid mercury given shape and purpose. The ships, for that's what they had to be, were unlike anything in humanity's wildest science fiction imaginings. "How many?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the growing cacophony of alarms that had begun echoing throughout the facility. "Thousands," Cale replied, his voice hollow. "Maybe tens of thousands. They're appearing over every major population center simultaneously. London, Tokyo, New York, Moscow, Sao Paulo, everywhere. Across the Atlantic Ocean, in the bustling metropolis of New Chicago, Commander Thane Blackwater was experiencing his own moment of world-shattering realization. The veteran pilot had seen combat in 3 different theaters during the resource wars of the 2040s, had flown missions that would have broken lesser men, but nothing had prepared him for the sight that greeted him as he stepped onto the flight deck of the USS Meridian, the massive aircraft carrier, humanity's most advanced floating fortress. Suddenly seemed as insignificant as a child's toy boat in a bathtub. Above them, the alien vessels hung in the sky like dark angels of judgment, their surfaces reflecting the morning light in ways that hurt to look at directly. Each ship was roughly the size of a city block, yet they moved with the fluid grace of living creatures. "Sir, we're receiving no response to any communication attempts," reported Lieutenant Sage Ironheart, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands as she worked the communication console. The young officer had graduated top of her class from the Naval Academy, but her training had never covered first contact protocols with hostile alien forces. Thane's jaw tightened as he watched the alien formation through his binoculars. There was something predatory about their movement patterns, something that spoke to his combat-honed instincts. These weren't explorers or diplomats. These were hunters, and humanity had just become their prey. In the underground bunkers beneath the Swiss Alps, where the Global Defense Initiative maintained its most classified operations, Director Orion Stormwind was coordinating humanity's first response to an extraterrestrial threat. The man who had spent his entire career preparing for theoretical scenarios now faced the reality that all their contingency plans seemed woefully inadequate. "Status report," he commanded, his voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the command center. Dozens of technicians worked frantically at their stations, their faces illuminated by the glow of screens, showing global tactical situations that grew more dire by the minute. "The objects have achieved stationary positions over 847 major population centers worldwide," reported Chief Analyst Lyra Nightshade, her fingers flying across her interface. "They're maintaining perfect formation at approximately 10,000 meters altitude. No energy signatures we can identify. No response to any communication attempts across all frequencies." Orion studied the global display, his mind racing through possibilities and probabilities. In his 30 years of military service, he had learned to read the intentions of enemies through their positioning and tactics. What he saw here filled him with a cold dread that settled in his bones like winter frost. The alien ships weren't just hovering. They were positioning themselves with surgical precision over humanity's most vital infrastructure. Power grids, communication hubs, military installations, population centers. It was a positioning of an enemy preparing for a coordinated strike of unprecedented scale. As if responding to his thoughts, the first ship opened fire. The beam that lanced down from the vessel over New Tokyo was unlike anything in humanity's arsenal. It wasn't the crude explosion of chemical weapons or even the focused destruction of laser technology. This was something far more elegant and infinitely more terrifying, a column of pure energy that seemed to unravel matter at the molecular level. Where the beam touched the earth, buildings didn't explode or burn. They simply ceased to exist, leaving behind perfectly circular craters that glowed with an otherworldly light. The silence that followed was more deafening than any explosion could have been. Within minutes, similar beams began falling from ships around the globe, each strike precise and devastating. Humanity's age of innocence had ended, and the war for Earth's survival had begun. The emergency klaxons aboard the USS Meridian created a symphony of chaos that matched the terror unfolding in the skies above. Commander Thane Blackwater gripped the railing of the command bridge as the first energy beam struck the naval base at Norfolk, Virginia. Through the tactical display, he watched in horror as one of humanity's most fortified military installations was reduced to a glowing crater in less than 30 seconds. All fighters to launch positions. Thane barked into his communicator. Though he knew their conventional aircraft would be woefully outmatched against technology that could disintegrate matter itself. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Lieutenant Sage Ironheart's fingers danced across a console with desperate efficiency, coordinating launch sequences for the carrier's complement of F-47 Wraith fighters. Each pilot climbing into their cockpit knew they were likely flying to their deaths, but not one hesitated. The alien ships had made their intentions clear with that first devastating strike. "Sir, we're receiving fragmentary reports from around the globe," Sage reported, her voice maintaining its professional calm despite the magnitude of what she was relaying. "London, Paris, Beijing, Moscow, they're all under attack. The energy weapons are targeting military installations first, but civilian casualties are..." She paused, swallowing hard. "The numbers are catastrophic. In the skies above New Chicago, the first wave of human fighters rose to meet the alien threat. Captain Raven Stormcrest led the formation, her fighter's engines screaming as she pushed the aircraft to its maximum velocity. Behind her, 11 other pilots followed in tight formation, their aircraft looking like angry wasps rising to challenge eagles. "Raven leader to all flights," she transmitted, her voice steady despite the impossible odds they faced. "Remember your training. Stay tight, watch your six, and make every shot count. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every person on this planet." The alien ship seemed to regard the approaching fighters with something resembling curiosity. They made no aggressive moves as the human aircraft closed the distance, their sleek forms continuing to hover with that unsettling grace. It wasn't until Raven's squadron was within weapons range that the aliens revealed another terrifying capability. Smaller craft began emerging from the larger vessels like deadly spores released from some cosmic fungus. These fighter-sized ships move with impossible agility, their forms shifting and flowing as if they were made of liquid metal given purpose and direction. They accelerated toward the human fighters with speeds that defied physics, closing the gap in seconds rather than minutes. "Break! Break! Break!" Raven screamed into her communicator as the alien fighters opened fire. Their weapons weren't the massive planet crackers that had destroyed Norfolk, but smaller, more precise versions that could slice through a fighter aircraft like a hot knife through butter. The first human pilot to die was Lieutenant Marcus Brightbane, a rookie who had graduated from flight school only 6 months earlier. His fighter simply vanished in a flash of alien energy, leaving behind nothing but scattered particles that glittered briefly in the morning sun before dispersing on the wind. He didn't even have time to scream. Back in the Swiss Command bunker, Director Orion Stormwind watched the global tactical situation deteriorate with each passing minute. The alien assault was coordinated with precision that spoke of careful planning and intimate knowledge of human military capabilities. They weren't just attacking randomly. They were systematically dismantling humanity's ability to mount an organized offense. "Sir, we're losing contact with military installations across all continents," Chief Analyst Lyra Nightshade reported, her usual composure cracking as the scope of the disaster became clear. "The aliens are targeting command and control centers, satellite uplinks, and major communication hubs. They're trying to blind us. Orion studied the tactical displays with the cold calculation of a career military strategist. The alien strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Cut off the head, and the body would thrash helplessly. Without coordination between military units, humanity's response would be reduced to isolated pockets of resistance that could be eliminated at leisure. Activate the Prometheus protocol, he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of decision that would change everything. All units are to operate under autonomous command. If we can't coordinate globally, we'll fight locally. The Prometheus protocol was humanity's last resort contingency plan, designed for scenarios where central command had been compromised. It authorized local commanders to take whatever actions they deemed necessary for survival, even if those actions violated international law or conventional military doctrine. It was, in essence, permission to fight dirty. In Geneva, Dr. Zephyr Castellanos was experiencing her own form of warfare as she struggled to understand the technology that was systematically destroying her world. The energy signatures from the alien weapons defied every principle of physics she had spent her life studying. The beams seemed to operate on quantum levels that human science had only theorized about. "Kale, look at these readings," she called to her research partner, who was frantically trying to establish contact with other scientific institutions around the globe. The energy patterns aren't random. There's a mathematical precision to them, almost like they're following some kind of formula. Dr. Cale Thornwick abandoned his communication attempts and rushed to her side, his eyes widening as he studied the data streaming across her displays. "It's not just precise," he whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and terror. "It's elegant. This isn't just advanced technology, it's art. They're not just destroying our infrastructure, they're doing it with mathematical beauty." The realization hit them both simultaneously. The aliens weren't just technologically superior. They were operating on a level of scientific understanding that made humanity's greatest achievements look like cave paintings. The energy weapons, the impossible flight characteristics of their ships, even their coordinated assault strategy. Everything spoke of a civilization that had mastered forces humanity barely knew existed. As if to emphasize this point, the alien ship hovering over Geneva began to descend. Its massive form blocked out the sun as it settled into a position directly above the CERN facility, the birthplace of humanity's most advanced particle physics research. The message was clear. They knew exactly what humanity's greatest scientific achievements were, and they were claiming them. The war for Earth had begun, and humanity was already losing. The underground command center beneath NORAD had become a tomb of flickering lights and desperate voices. General Atlas Ironforge stood before a wall of monitors that painted a picture of global devastation, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he absorbed reports from the few military installations still capable of communication. Each update brought worse news than the last. "General, we've lost contact with the Pacific Fleet," reported Colonel Ember Shadowhawk, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Last transmission indicated they were engaging alien fighters approximately 200 nautical miles west of Hawaii. That was 47 minutes ago. Atlas nodded grimly, his steel-gray eyes never leaving the tactical display. In his 40 years of military service, he had seen humanity's capacity for both creation and destruction, but nothing had prepared him for an enemy that could reduce aircraft carriers to molecular dust with surgical precision. The aliens weren't just winning. They were demonstrating the futility of human resistance with every engagement. "What about the European defense grid?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Offline, sir. The aliens targeted the primary control nodes in the first wave. Brussels, Berlin, and Rome are..." Colonel Shadowhawk paused, consulting her tablet with trembling fingers. "The casualty estimates are in the millions, and that's just from the initial strikes." High above the Colorado Mountains, the alien ship assigned to the NORAD sector hung, like a dark omen against the azure sky. Its presence was a constant reminder that humanity's most secure military installation was being watched, cataloged, and would likely be destroyed when the aliens deemed it convenient. The mountain itself, hollowed out and reinforced to withstand nuclear attack, suddenly seemed as fragile as an eggshell. Meanwhile, in the burning ruins of what had once been downtown Los Angeles, Sergeant Phoenix Nightblade led a squad of Marines through streets that looked like the aftermath of an apocalypse. The alien fighters had swept through the city like mechanical angels of death, their energy weapons carving precise channels of destruction through skyscrapers and residential blocks alike. "Movement, 2 o'clock," whispered Corporal Zarmoon Whisperer, her rifle trained on the skeletal remains of what had been a shopping mall. The young Marine's face was streaked with soot and dried blood, her eyes holding the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen too much death in too short a time. Phoenix raised his hand, signaling the squad to halt. In the distance, they could hear the distinctive whine of alien engines, a sound that had become synonymous with death in the 6 hours since the invasion began. The aliens were conducting what appeared to be systematic sweeps of urban areas, eliminating any signs of organized resistance with ruthless efficiency. "We need to reach the evacuation point," Phoenix murmured into his throat mic, knowing that their chances of survival decreased with every minute they remained in the open. "Command says there are civilian transports still operating out of LAX, but we need to move now." The squad began advancing through the rubble-strewn streets, their movements careful and deliberate. Each of them knew that a single mistake could bring down the wrath of alien fighters that could appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. The enemy's technology made conventional military tactics obsolete, forcing human forces to adapt to guerrilla warfare in their own cities. Back in the Swiss Alps, Dr. Zephyr Castellanos had made a discovery that filled her with both hope and terror. Working alongside Dr. Cale Thornwick in their makeshift laboratory, she had been analyzing the quantum signatures of the alien energy weapons when she noticed something that shouldn't have been possible. "Cale, look at this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper as she highlighted a section of data on her holographic display. "The energy patterns from the alien weapons, they're not completely foreign. There are underlying mathematical structures that match theoretical models we developed for quantum field manipulation." Dr. Thornwick leaned closer, his eyes widening as he processed the implications of what she was showing him. "That's impossible. Those theories were purely hypothetical. We don't have the technology to test them, let alone weaponize them." "But what if someone else does?" Zephyr asked, her mind racing through possibilities that seemed to grow more disturbing with each passing second. What if these aliens didn't develop this technology independently? What if they've been watching us, learning from us, taking our theoretical breakthroughs and advancing them beyond our current capabilities? The thought was chilling in its implications. If the aliens had been observing human scientific development, it meant they had been planning this invasion for years, possibly decades. Every breakthrough in quantum physics, every advancement in energy manipulation, every theoretical paper published by Earth's greatest minds, all of it could have been intelligence gathered by an enemy preparing for war. Their conversation was interrupted by a low rumble that seemed to emanate from the very foundations of the mountain. Through the laboratory windows, they could see the alien ship that had been hovering over Geneva beginning to descend toward the CERN facility. Its massive form cast shadows that seemed to swallow light itself, and as it drew closer, they could see details of its construction that defied human understanding. The ship's hull appeared to be composed of material that shifted and flowed like liquid metal, yet maintained structural integrity that allowed it to support its enormous mass. Strange symbols pulsed along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if they were designed to be incomprehensible to human perception. "They're landing," Cale whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of scientific curiosity and primal fear. "After all these hours of hovering and attacking from a distance, they're actually coming down." Zephyr felt her heart racing as she watched the alien vessel settle onto the CERN campus with impossible grace. The implications were staggering. If the aliens were willing to land, it meant they were confident that human resistance had been sufficiently neutralized. It meant they were ready to begin the next phase of whatever plan they had been executing. Around the globe, similar scenes were playing out as alien ships began landing at strategic locations. Military installations, scientific research facilities, major population centers, all were being occupied by forces that humanity could barely comprehend, let alone resist. In the command bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, Director Orion Stormwind received reports of the landings with growing dread. Each alien touchdown represented another nail in the coffin of human civilization, another step toward whatever fate the invaders had planned for Earth's inhabitants. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildups at each landing site," Chief Analyst Lyra Nightshade reported, her fingers flying across multiple interfaces as she tried to process the flood of incoming data. The aliens appeared to be establishing some kind of infrastructure, power grids, communication networks. They're not just occupying our facilities, they're transforming them. Orion studied the global tactical display with the grim fascination of a chess master watching his opponent execute a perfect endgame. The alien strategy was becoming clear. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a complete restructuring of human civilization. They weren't here to destroy Earth. They were here to remake it according to their own design. "What about our remaining forces?" he asked, though he suspected the answer would offer little comfort. "Scatter-resistant cells are still operating in major urban areas," Lyra replied, consulting her tactical readouts. "But without central coordination, they're fighting isolated battles against an enemy that seems to anticipate their every move. It's as if the aliens know our tactics better than we do." The truth of that statement was more accurate than either of them realized. High above the Earth, in the command ship that served as the nerve center for the alien fleet, beings of crystalline intelligence reviewed the progress of their carefully orchestrated campaign. They had indeed been studying humanity for decades, learning not just their technology but their psychology, their military doctrine, their very way of thinking. To them, humans were not enemies to be destroyed but resources to be managed. The invasion was merely the first step in a process of integration that would transform both species in ways that neither could yet imagine. And the abandoned subway tunnels beneath Manhattan. A different kind of war was beginning to take shape. Captain Orion Blackthorne had gathered the survivors of 3 different military units into what was becoming the nucleus of organized resistance in the northeastern United States. The tunnels provided protection from the alien sensors that seemed capable of detecting human activity on the surface with uncanny precision. "Listen up, people." Orion addressed a mixed group of soldiers, police officers, and armed civilians who had found their way to this underground sanctuary. "The old rules don't apply anymore. We're not fighting an enemy we understand, using tactics that make sense. We're fighting for survival, and that means we adapt or we die." Among the gathered survivors was Dr. Luna Stormweaver, a quantum physicist who had escaped from Columbia University when the alien ship landed on the campus. Her knowledge of advanced physics had already proven invaluable in understanding the enemy's technology, and her presence gave the resistance something they desperately needed: hope that human science might find a way to fight back. "The energy signatures I've been monitoring suggest the aliens are establishing what I can only describe as quantum anchors," Luna explained, her voice echoing in the concrete tunnel. "They're not just occupying our facilities. They're fundamentally altering the quantum structure of matter in those areas. It's as if they're rewriting the laws of physics to suit their needs." The implications were staggering. If the aliens could manipulate quantum fields on such a massive scale, they possessed technology that made humanity's greatest scientific achievements look primitive by comparison. Yet Luna's analysis also revealed something potentially exploitable. The quantum anchors required an enormous amount of energy to maintain, energy that had to come from somewhere. "If we can disrupt their power sources," she continued, "we might be able to create dead zones where their technology doesn't function properly. It won't stop them, but it might give us a fighting chance." Meanwhile, in the ruins of Chicago, Sergeant Phoenix Nightblade had successfully led a squad to one of the few remaining evacuation points still operating. The sight that greeted them at O'Hare Airport was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Thousands of civilians waiting in orderly lines for transport to safer locations, their faces showing the strain of the past day, but also a determination that spoke to resilience of the human spirit. Sergeant Nightblade reporting for duty, Phoenix announced as he approached the makeshift command post that had been established in the airport's main terminal. The officer in charge, Colonel Sage Ironheart, looked up from a tactical display with eyes that had seen too much in too short a time. "Good to see you made it, Sergeant," she replied, her voice carrying the weight of command decisions that would determine the fate of thousands. "We're coordinating the evacuation of non-essential personnel to secure locations in the Rocky Mountains. The aliens seem to be focusing on major population centers and strategic facilities, so remote areas might offer temporary safety." Phoenix nodded, understanding the unspoken truth behind her words. There was no truly safe place on Earth anymore, only locations that hadn't yet attracted alien attention. The evacuation was buying time, nothing more, but time was the most precious commodity humanity possessed. "What about military assets?" he asked, watching as another transport aircraft lifted off in disguise that might contain death at any moment. "We're establishing resistance cells in major urban areas," Colonel Ironheart explained, her fingers tracing routes on the tactical display. "The aliens seem to have difficulty detecting underground activity, so we're moving our operations below ground wherever possible. It's not much, but it's a start." In the Swiss Alps, Dr. Zephyr Castellanos and Dr. Cale Thornwick had made a discovery that could change everything. Working in their hidden laboratory while alien forces occupied the CERN facility above them, they had detected something extraordinary in the quantum signatures of the alien technology. "Cale, you need to see this," Zephyr whispered urgently, her eyes fixed on a holographic display that showed energy patterns unlike anything they had previously observed. "The aliens aren't just using advanced technology, they're using our technology. Look at these quantum field equations. They're based on the theoretical framework we published 3 years ago." Dr. Thornwick studied the data with growing amazement and horror. The mathematical structures underlying the alien energy weapons were indeed derived from human theoretical physics, but advanced far beyond anything Earth scientists had imagined possible. It was as if someone had taken their most speculative theories and turned them into devastating reality. "This means they've been watching us for years," he said, his voice barely audible. "Every paper we published, every breakthrough we made, they were learning from us, building on our work." The realization was both terrifying and oddly hopeful. If the aliens were using human-derived technology, it meant their weapons and defenses might have vulnerabilities that human scientists could exploit. The enemy's greatest strength, their technological superiority, might also be their weakness. "We need to get this information to the Resistance," Zephyr said, her mind already racing through the implications. "If we can understand how they've modified our theories, we might be able to find ways to disrupt their systems." Above them, the alien occupation of CERN continued with methodical precision. The crystalline beings that emerged from the landed ship moved to the facility with purpose, their forms shifting and adapting to interact with human technology in ways that seemed impossible. They were not destroying the particle accelerators and quantum computers. They were improving them, integrating alien technology with human science to create something entirely new. The transformation of CERN was being replicated at scientific facilities around the globe. The aliens weren't just conquering Earth. They were upgrading it, preparing it for some purpose that remained hidden from human understanding. Each facility they occupied became a hybrid of human and alien technology, a fusion that hinted at plans far more complex than simple invasion. In the underground command bunker, Director Orion Stormwind received reports of these transformations with growing unease. The aliens' behavior didn't match any invasion scenario his strategists had ever considered. They were acting more like colonists and conquerors, more like scientists and soldiers. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," Chief Analyst Lyra Nightshade announced suddenly, her voice tight with surprise. "It's coming from the alien ship over Geneva, and it's in English." The command center fell silent as the transmission crackled through their speakers. The voice that emerged was unmistakably alien, harmonics and overtones that no human throat could produce. Yet the words were perfectly clear. "Humans of Earth," the voice began, each word carefully enunciated as if the speaker was still learning the language. "We are the architects of the quantum collective. We have come not as conquerors, but as gardeners. Your species has reached a critical juncture in its development. You have discovered the fundamental forces that govern reality, but you lack the wisdom to use them safely. We are here to guide your evolution, to prevent you from destroying yourselves as so many species before you have done." The transmission continued, but Orion had heard enough. The aliens weren't invading Earth. They were intervening in human development, imposing their will on a species they viewed as children playing with dangerous toys. The war for Earth wasn't about territory or resources. It was about the right of humanity to determine its own destiny. Part 5. The Truth Revealed. The alien transmission continued to echo through command centers and resistance hideouts around the globe, each word carrying implications that fundamentally altered humanity's understanding of the invasion. In the underground tunnels of Manhattan, Captain Orion Blackthorne gathered his resistance fighters around a salvage radio as the crystalline voice explained the true nature of their presence on Earth. Your quantum experiments have created ripples in the fabric of reality that extend far beyond your solar system. The alien speaker continued, its harmonious tones somehow making the words even more chilling. The device you call the Large Hadron Collider has been generating quantum instabilities that threaten not just your world, but entire sectors of the galaxy. We have observed 17 civilizations destroy themselves through uncontrolled quantum manipulation. We will not allow Earth to become the 18th. Dr. Luna Stormweaver felt her blood run cold as she processed the implications. Her own research had contributed to the theoretical frameworks that made CERN's experiments possible. If the aliens were correct, then humanity's greatest scientific achievement was also its greatest threat. Not just to Earth, but to countless other worlds. "They're saying we're dangerous," whispered Private Kai Shadowmere, a young soldier whose face still bore the innocence of someone who believed in the fundamental goodness of human progress. "They're saying our science is a weapon we don't understand." Captain Blackthorne studied the faces of his fighters, seeing his own doubts reflected in their eyes. The alien explanation reframed everything they thought they knew about the invasion. If the Quantum Collective was telling the truth, then humanity wasn't a victim of unprovoked aggression. They were a species being forcibly prevented from committing cosmic suicide. "Even if that's true," Blackthorne said finally, his voice carrying the conviction of a man who had made his choice, "it doesn't give them the right to decide our fate for us. If we're going to destroy ourselves, that's our decision to make." In the Swiss Alps, Dr. Zephyr Castellanos and Dr. Cale Thornwick listened to the transmission with the horror of scientists realizing that their life's work might have doomed their species. The quantum field equations they had developed, the theoretical frameworks they had published, all of it had apparently been leading humanity toward a catastrophic mistake that could unravel reality itself. "The quantum cascade effect," Cale whispered, his face pale as he pulled up their old research files. "Remember the theoretical models we ran 3 years ago? The ones that showed how quantum field manipulation could create self-sustaining reactions?" Zephyr nodded, her mind racing through the mathematics they had dismissed as purely theoretical. "We calculated that the probability of such a cascade was less than 1 in a trillion. We thought it was safe to publish because the energy requirements were beyond anything humanity could generate. But what if we were wrong?" Cale asked, his voice barely audible. "What if CERN's experiments have been gradually building toward exactly the kind of cascade we modeled? What if every time they fire up the collider, they're bringing us closer to tearing a hole in reality itself?" Above them, the alien occupation of CERN continued with renewed urgency. The crystalline beings moved to the facility with purpose, their forms shifting and adapting as they worked to modify the particle accelerator. They weren't destroying human technology. They were trying to stabilize it, to prevent the quantum cascade that their calculations showed was inevitable if humanity continued its current research trajectory. The transmission from the Quantum Collective provided more details about their intervention. "We have been monitoring your species for 847 of your years," the alien voice explained. "We have watched you develop from primitive tool users to quantum manipulators in what is, by galactic standards, an impossibly short time. Your rate of technological advancement far exceeds your wisdom development. This imbalance has destroyed every species we have encountered that exhibited similar patterns." In the NORAD command bunker, General Atlas Ironforge listened to the alien explanation with the grim understanding of a military strategist who recognized a superior opponent. The Quantum Collective wasn't just technologically advanced. They were experienced in dealing with species like humanity. They had seen the scenario play out before, and they knew how it ended. "Sir, we're receiving reports from resistance cells around the globe," Colonel Ember Shadowhawk reported, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "The aliens aren't just occupying our facilities. They're actively modifying them. Every major research installation, every particle accelerator, every quantum computer, they're all being integrated into some kind of global network." Atlas studied the tactical displays with growing understanding. The alien strategy was becoming clear. They weren't trying to conquer humanity. They were trying to save it from itself. Every facility they occupied, Every modification they made was part of a massive effort to prevent the quantum cascade that would destroy not just Earth, but potentially entire star systems. "What about civilian casualties?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Lower than we initially estimated," Colonel Shadowhawk replied, consulting her reports with surprise. "The aliens seem to be going out of their way to minimize human deaths. Their weapons are precise, targeting only military assets and research facilities. It's almost as if they're trying to disable our ability to resist without actually destroying us." The realization hit Atlas like a physical blow. The Quantum Collective wasn't waging war against humanity. They were performing surgery, cutting out the parts of human civilization that pose a threat while trying to preserve the rest. It was the action of a species that viewed humans not as enemies, but as patients in need of treatment. In the ruins of Los Angeles, Sergeant Phoenix Nightblade led his squad through streets that showed signs of the aliens' surgical precision. Buildings that housed military communications equipment had been reduced to glowing craters, but hospitals and schools remained untouched. Even the civilian infrastructure, power grids, water treatment plants, transportation networks, had been carefully preserved. "They're not trying to destroy us," Corporal Zara Moonwhisper observed as they passed a children's playground that sat undamaged next to the ruins of the National Guard Armory. "They're trying to control us." Phoenix nodded grimly, understanding the distinction. An enemy trying to destroy you was predictable, following patterns of warfare that human military doctrine could address. An enemy trying to save you from yourself was far more dangerous, because their actions were guided by a morality that might not align with human values. The transmission from Quantum Collective concluded with an offer that would divide humanity's remaining leadership. "We extend to your species the opportunity for guided evolution," the alien voice announced. "Those who accept our guidance will be integrated into the galactic community as junior partners. Those who resist will be contained until such time as your species develops the wisdom necessary to handle quantum manipulation safely. The choice is yours, but the timeline is not. The quantum cascade approaches critical threshold. We estimate 72 of your hours before the point of no return. 72 hours. 3 days for humanity to decide whether to surrender its independence in exchange for survival, or to fight for the right to determine its own fate, even if that fate might be extinction." The war for Earth had become something far more complex than anyone had imagined, a struggle not just for territory or resources, but for the very soul of human civilization. The emergency session of the United Nations Security Council convened in a bunker beneath Geneva, the irony not lost on anyone that they were meeting in the shadow of the alien ship that had transformed CERN into something unrecognizable. Secretary General Arya Nightfall presided over a gathering of world leaders whose faces reflected the weight of a decision that would determine humanity's future. "The Quantum Collective has given us 72 hours to decide," she announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was saying. "Accept their guidance and become junior partners in their galactic community, or face containment until we develop what they consider sufficient wisdom to handle quantum technology safely." President Elena Stormridge of the North American Federation leaned forward, her eyes hard with the determination that had carried her through 3 terms of office during humanity's most turbulent period. "Containment is just a euphemism for imprisonment. They're asking us to choose between slavery and a cage." "Are those really our only options?" asked Prime Minister Thane Munstrider of the European Alliance, his voice carrying the weariness of a man who had watched his continent's greatest scientific achievements become tools of alien intervention. "Perhaps there's a third path, cooperation without submission." Chancellor Sage Ironwill of the Germanic states shook her head grimly. "You heard their transmission. They watched 17 other civilizations destroy themselves through quantum manipulation. To them, we're not partners to be negotiated with. We're children play with nuclear weapons." In the resistance hideouts scattered across the globe, similar debates were taking place with far more personal stakes. Captain Orion Blackthorne faces fighters in the Manhattan tunnels, knowing that whatever decision they made would likely determine whether they lived to see another sunrise. "The way I see it," he said, his voice echoing off the concrete walls, "we have 3 choices. We can surrender and hope the aliens keep their word about treating us as junior partners. We can fight and probably die, but at least die free. or we can try to find a way to prove we're not the threat they think we are. Dr. Luna Stormweaver looked up from the quantum field equations she had been frantically reviewing. There might be a fourth option, she said quietly, her voice carrying a mixture of hope and terror. What if we could demonstrate that we understand the danger? What if we could show them that humanity is capable of the wisdom they claim we lack? Private Kai Shadowmere, still struggling with the revelation that humanity's greatest scientific achievements might be cosmic weapons, asked a question that haunted them all. But what if they're right? What if we really are too dangerous to be left alone? The debate was interrupted by an urgent transmission from one of their surface scouts. Captain, you need to see this. The aliens, they're not just modifying our facilities anymore. They're building something new. Above ground, across the globe, massive construction projects have begun at every alien landing site. The crystalline beings work with impossible speed and precision, their forms shifting and adapting to manipulate matter at the molecular level. What they were building defied human understanding. Structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their geometry hurting to look at directly. In the Swiss Alps, Dr. Zephyr Castellanos and Dr. Cale Thornwick watched through hidden cameras as the aliens transformed the CERN facility into something that bore no resemblance to human architecture. The particle accelerator had been expanded into a complex network of quantum field generators that pulse with energies that made their instruments scream warnings. They're not just preventing us from creating a quantum cascade, Zephyr realized, her voice filled with awe and horror. They're building a containment system. If we refuse their offer, they're going to lock us in a quantum prison. Cale studied the energy readings with growing understanding. It's elegant in a terrifying way. They're creating a localized space-time bubble around Earth. We'd still exist, still be able to live our lives, but we'd be completely cut off from the rest of the universe. No faster-than-light travel, no quantum communication, no way to spread our dangerous technology to other worlds. The implications were staggering. The quantum collective wasn't bluffing about containment. They were actively preparing to isolate Earth from the galactic community if humanity refused to accept their guidance. It would be a prison made of the very fabric of reality itself. Meanwhile, in hidden laboratories around the world, human scientists were making discoveries that added new dimensions to the crisis. Dr. Raven Stormcrest, working in a secret facility beneath the Australian outback, had been analyzing the quantum signatures of the alien technology when she made a breakthrough that changed everything. The aliens aren't just using our theoretical frameworks, she transmitted to resistance cells worldwide. They're using our actual research data. Every paper published, every experiment conducted, every theoretical model developed, they have all of it. But more than that, they've been subtly influencing our research direction for decades. The evidence was hidden in the mathematical structures of human quantum theory itself. Subtle biases in equations, elegant solutions that seemed almost too perfect, theoretical frameworks that led inevitably toward the kind of quantum manipulation that the aliens claimed was dangerous. Humanity's scientific development hadn't been natural. It had been guided, shaped by an alien intelligence that had been preparing for this moment for generations. They'd been playing a game that started before any of us were born, Dr. Stormcrest continued. Every breakthrough we thought we made independently, every leap of scientific intuition, it was all part of their plan. They've been leading us toward this crisis so they could justify their intervention. In the NORAD bunker, General Atlas Ironforge received this intelligence with the cold fury of a military strategist who realized he had been outmaneuvered before the game even began. The quantum collective hadn't just been observing humanity. They had been manipulating human development, creating the very crisis they now claim to be solving. Sir, we're receiving reports of similar manipulation in other fields, Colonel Ember Shadowhawk reported. Computer science, materials engineering, energy production. Everywhere we look, we're finding evidence of subtle alien influence. They've been shaping our entire technological civilization. Atlas studied the global tactical display with new understanding. The alien strategy was even more sophisticated than he had imagined. They hadn't just prepared to contain humanity. They had created the conditions that made containment seem necessary. It was manipulation on a scale that spanned centuries, a long-term plan that made human strategic thinking look primitive by comparison. "What about our remaining military assets?" he asked, though he suspected the answer would offer little hope. "Scattered and largely ineffective," Colonel Shadowhawk replied. "The aliens seem to anticipate our every move. It's as if they know our tactical doctrine better than we do." Of course they did, Atlas realized. If they had been influencing human development for centuries, they would have shaped military thinking as well as scientific research. Every strategy, every tactical innovation, every military doctrine, all of it could have been subtly guided by alien intelligence. The 72-hour deadline was more than just a time limit for decision-making. It was a culmination of a plan that had been centuries in the making. The quantum collective had created the crisis, shaped humanity's response to it, and now offered the only solution they would accept. In resistance hideouts around the world, human fighters faced the terrible realization that they were fighting an enemy that had been preparing for this conflict since before their grandparents were born. Every advantage they thought they possessed, every strength they believed they could rely on, had been anticipated and countered by an intelligence that operated on timescales that dwarfed human planning. Yet in that realization, some found not despair but determination. If humanity had been manipulated, if their development had been guided by alien intelligence, then perhaps the very traits the quantum collective sought to control, human unpredictability, creativity, and stubborn independence, were the keys to resistance. The war for Earth's future was entering its final phase, and the outcome would determine not just the fate of humanity, but the nature of freedom itself in a universe where advanced civilizations claimed the right to guide the development of younger species. Time was running out, and the choice that would define humanity's destiny could no longer be delayed. With less than 24 hours remaining before the quantum collective's deadline, humanity's scattered resistance had coalesced around a desperate plan that would either save their species or destroy it. In the hidden laboratory beneath the Australian outback, Dr. Raven Stormcrest worked frantically alongside scientists from around the globe, connected through quantum encrypted communications that the aliens had somehow failed to detect. "The key is in their own technology," she explained to the assembled team of humanity's greatest minds. "They've been using our theoretical frameworks, but they've also revealed the mathematical structures underlying their quantum manipulation. If we can reverse engineer their containment field generators, we might be able to turn their own weapons against them." Dr. Zephyr Castellanos, transmitting from her hidden position near CERN, studied the alien construction with new understanding. The containment field they're building, it's not just a prison. It's a quantum resonance chamber. If we could overload it, create a feedback loop in their own systems, we could potentially disable their entire fleet, completed Dr. Luna Stormweaver from the Manhattan tunnels. But the energy requirements would be enormous. We'd need to tap into every remaining power grid on the planet simultaneously. The plan was audacious in its scope and terrifying in its implications. By linking every functional power plant, every quantum computer, every particle accelerator still under human control, they could create a planet-wide energy pulse that might disrupt the alien containment systems. But the same pulse that could free humanity might also trigger the very quantum cascade the aliens claim to be preventing. "We'd be gambling the existence of Earth itself," Dr. Cale Thornwick observed, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision they were contemplating. "If the aliens are right about the quantum cascade, if our calculations are wrong, we could destroy not just ourselves but potentially entire star systems." In the NORAD bunker, General Atlas Ironford coordinated the military aspect of the plan with the grim efficiency of a commander who knew he was ordering humanity's last stand. Every remaining military unit, every resistance cell, every armed civilian would need to act in perfect coordination to have any chance of success. "The aliens have superior technology, but they've also revealed their weakness," he explained to his staff. "They think like scientists, not soldiers. They plan for logical responses, rational decisions. They're not prepared for humans to choose potential extinction over certain subjugation." Colonel Ember Shadowhawk studied the tactical displays with the focused intensity of someone calculating impossible odds. "Sir, even if we succeed in disrupting their containment fields, we'll still be facing an enemy with technology centuries ahead of ours. How do we fight ships that can manipulate matter at the quantum level?" "We don't fight their ships," Atlas replied, his eyes fixed on the global strategic display. We fight their assumptions. They believe they're saving us from ourselves. We're going to prove that humanity would rather die free than live as prisoners, even if that freedom comes with the risk of cosmic suicide. Across the globe, the final preparations began. In hidden bunkers and abandoned facilities, human engineers worked to link power grids and communication networks into a single planet-spanning system. Resistance fighters took positions near alien installations, ready to strike at the moment the quantum pulse disrupted the invaders' technology. Scientists made final calculations, knowing that a single error could doom their species. The quantum collective seemed unaware of the preparations, their crystalline forms continuing their methodical construction of containment systems around the globe. Their confidence was absolute. They had planned for the scenario for centuries, had guided human development to this exact moment, had anticipated every possible response. But they had not anticipated the response that humanity was actually preparing. In the Swiss Alps, Dr. Zephyr Castellanos made final adjustments to the quantum field generators that would serve as the focal point for the global energy pulse. The irony was not lost on her that they were using the very CERN facility the aliens had modified to potentially destroy the alien fleet. The particle accelerator that had been humanity's greatest scientific achievement would either become the instrument of their liberation or their extinction. Zephyr were detecting massive energy buildups in the alien ships. Dr. Cale Thornwick reported, his voice tight with urgency. I think they know something is happening. Above them, the crystalline beings had indeed detected the subtle changes in Earth's electromagnetic field as human power grids linked together in preparation for the pulse. Their response was swift and decisive. The containment field generators began activating ahead of schedule, creating localized space-time distortions that would trap humanity in quantum isolation. They're accelerating their timeline, Zephyr realized, her hands flying across the control interfaces. We have minutes, not hours. Around the globe, the message went out to every resistance cell, every hidden laboratory, every human fighter who had chosen to stand against the alien intervention. The moment of truth had arrived, and there would be no second chances. Dr. Luna Stormweaver remained behind, her hands poised over quantum field controls that would contribute Earth's eastern seaboard power grid to the global pulse. If this works, she whispered to herself, we'll have proven that wisdom isn't just about avoiding danger. It's about having the courage to face the consequences of your choices. The countdown began, transmitted simultaneously to every human installation still capable of receiving it. 10 seconds to either liberation or extinction. 9 seconds to prove that humanity deserved the right to determine its own fate. 8 seconds to demonstrate that freedom was worth any price, even the price of existence itself. 7, 6, 5. The alien containment fields began to solidify, reality itself bending around Earth, as the quantum collective prepared to isolate humanity from the galactic community forever. 4, 3, 2. In laboratories and bunkers around the globe, human hands hovered over controls that would either save their species or destroy it. 1. The pulse began. Every power plant on Earth discharged its energy simultaneously. Every quantum computer contributed its processing power to the calculation. Every particle accelerator fired in perfect synchronization. The combined energy output of human civilization, focused to the modified CERN facility, created a quantum resonance wave that propagated outward at the speed of light. For a moment that lasted an eternity, the fate of humanity hung in the balance between liberation and annihilation. Part 8. When the sky fell silent. The quantum pulse erupted from Earth with the fury of a dying star, its energy signature unlike anything the universe had ever witnessed. In that moment of absolute commitment, humanity had chosen to risk everything rather than accept salvation at the cost of their freedom. The wave of pure quantum energy raced outward from the planet, carrying with it the hopes, fears, and desperate determination of an entire species. Dr. Zephyr Castellanos watched through the CERN facility's sensors as the pulse struck the alien containment fields with devastating effect. The crystalline structures that had been reshaping reality around Earth began to resonate, their perfect mathematical harmonies disrupted by the chaotic creativity of human quantum manipulation. For the first time since the invasion began, the aliens' technology faltered. It's working, she whispered, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. The containment fields are destabilizing. But even as she spoke, she could see the terrible cost of their gambit. The quantum cascade the aliens had warned about was beginning, reality itself starting to unravel at the subatomic level. Space-time rippled like water disturbed by a stone, and for a terrifying moment, it seemed as though humanity had chosen mutual destruction over subjugation. High above Earth, the Quantum Collective's command ship shuddered as the pulse struck its quantum cores. The crystalline beings aboard experienced something they had not felt in millennia: surprise. In all their calculations, across all the civilizations they had guided or contained, none had ever chosen potential extinction over certain survival. The alien commander, a being of pure crystalline thought whose name translated roughly as harmony of infinite calculations, felt something that might have been respect as it watched humanity's desperate gambit unfold. These humans were not just refusing guidance. They were willing to tear apart the fabric of reality itself rather than surrender their independence. Fascinating. It communicated to its subordinates through quantum harmonics that resonated with mathematical beauty. They would rather die as themselves than live as we would make them. Perhaps we have underestimated the value of chaos. On Earth's surface, the effects of the quantum pulse were immediate and dramatic. The alien ships that had hung like dark omens over every major city began to flicker, their perfect forms wavering as their quantum stabilizers failed. Some vanished entirely, their crews retreating to higher dimensions to escape the cascade effect. Others crashed to Earth, their crystalline occupants emerging to find themselves stranded on a world that had chosen madness over safety. In the Manhattan tunnels, Captain Orion Blackthorne felt the ground shake as alien ships fell from the sky above. The resistance fighters who were prepared for a final, hopeless battle instead found themselves witnessing the impossible. Humanity had struck back against gods and somehow survived. Status report. He called into his communicator, hardly daring to hope. "The alien ships are down," came the reply from Dr. Luna Stormweaver, her voice filled with exhausted amazement. The quantum pulse disrupted their technology across the entire fleet. "But Orion, the cascade is still building. We may have won the battle, only to lose everything else." The quantum cascade that humanity had triggered was indeed spreading, reality becoming increasingly unstable as the fundamental forces that held matter together began to fluctuate wildly. In laboratories around the globe, scientists watched in horror as their instruments registered energy levels that should have been impossible. But then something unexpected happened. The alien technology that had been integrated into human facilities began to activate, not as weapons or containment systems, but as stabilizers. The crystalline beings who had survived the pulse emerged from their damaged ships and began working frantically to contain the cascade, their forms shifting and adapting as they manipulated quantum fields with desperate precision. "They're trying to save us," Dr. Cale Thornwick realized, watching through hidden cameras as aliens and humans worked side by side to prevent the destruction of Earth. Even after we attacked them, they're trying to prevent the cascade. The next several hours became a desperate collaboration between species that had been at war moments before. Human scientists provided their understanding of the quantum systems they had built, while alien engineers contributed technology that could stabilize the cascade before it reached critical mass. It was cooperation born of necessity, but cooperation nonetheless. In the CERN facility, Dr. Zephyr Castellanos found herself working directly with one of the crystalline beings, their forms of communication bridging the gap between human intuition and alien logic. The creature, she had begun thinking of it as resonance, communicated through mathematical equations that appeared directly in her mind, while she responded with the chaotic creativity that had made the pulse possible in the first place. Together, they managed to create a stabilization matrix that gradually brought the quantum cascade under control. The process took 18 hours of continuous work, during which the fate of not just Earth, but potentially entire star systems hung in the balance. When it was over, when the last quantum fluctuation had been dampened and reality had returned to something resembling stability, both species found themselves fundamentally changed by the experience. The Quantum Collective's commander materialized in the CERN facility, its crystalline form shifting to approximate human proportions as it addressed the exhausted scientists. "You have taught us something we thought impossible to learn.